Oregon Registry. Yeah. I want you to take a look at that. That is the portion of the map that it shows, which is primarily just Western Oregon. This portion here is only about the lower third of the map, the part that is the least populated here in the state, as far as the West Coast goes. You notice there's a whole bunch of blue dots there. All over the place there's those blue dots. The top half of the map is pretty much blue. Blue all over. From Hood River and the Dalles all the way to Portland and south. Holy shit. Now the important part of the screensaver for this, I want you to take a look at the bottom. There's a little over 1,000 registered sex offenders. That means that you can find out who your sex offenders are. The problem is this is only level 3 sex offenders. These are the ones who are considered at a high risk for reoffending. Excuse me. Dude fucked a kid. All right? Knowing the consequences. Already knowing the consequences. Both men and women, and you'd be surprised how many women are currently sitting in the jail here. Not advertised all over the media like you would expect if it was a male. There are 3 women currently sitting in jail in Tillamook County on sexual assault charges, specifically against minors, specifically against children. Actual children. You know, I've never been charged with sexual assault. This is an easy one. In a world where it is so easy for a man to get railroaded, it's because I am a truly good person. If you have to tell people you're good, chances are you're probably not, right? Ask any child I ever babysat. None of them will ever pretend that I did any such thing to them. When you want to talk about the guy who, oh, you shouldn't teach your boys if at first you don't succeed, try and try again. You know what? It's actually fine to teach your boys that, and your girls. If you're trying to get a GED because you got to take care of your family, you can't go to school all day. You need to make sure that your brothers and sisters are fed, that your dad who broke his neck and is now a quadriplegic, you got to make sure he's fed. You got to make sure that you do stuff. You got to drop out of school early, and that sucks. That's reality for a lot of people. A lot of people. Not necessarily that exact scenario. It might be that mom is depressed and is drowning her depression in the bottom of a bottle, and you as the older sister or the older brother are the only thing keeping that family together. No, your efforts aren't recognized. I get that. I assure you, your brothers and sisters do see what it is that you're doing for them. And when they're frustrated and they're angry and they're taking it out on you, they're just frustrated. And I know how much it hurts as an older sibling getting put through that. I know what it's like when your siblings are throwing tantrums at you because you're not doing anything about the bullies at school. Meanwhile, if you try going to the school, they're going to tell you, well, you're not the parent or guardian, and you can't explain to them, hey, our mother's a fucking alcoholic. She is a hardcore alcoholic. She rarely leaves the couch. When she goes and takes a shower, we steal one of the couch cushions. We've got an extra one in the closet that we flip over so we can wash the urine smell out of the one that she's been sitting on for 3 days. You can't tell the school that. They'll separate you and your brothers and sisters, and you know you can't be having that. You also know that because you're taking over the adult role, you're taking over the parent role. You know that you're the one that's going to get bitched at about the shit at school, but you can't do anything about it. Your hands are actually tied because of your mother's alcoholism. Meanwhile, you're probably taking abuse from her too. And she's probably pissed off when you have to keep on reminding her when she says, hey, you need to go get me another bottle. Mom, I'm 16, okay? I'm 16 years old. I cannot buy you a fucking bottle. You know how screwed it up it is to have to tell your own parent that? I'm only 16, Mom. I'm only 16, Dad. It is irrational for you to throw a tantrum and scream and yell at me and get a fucking Coors bottle stuck in the fucking drywall. You go, what does that have to do with anything? Oh, you think he's not going to chuck an empty fucking bottle at you once in a while? He's already told you 3 times that you need to go get him a bottle. You've told him 3 times that you can't because you're only 16. And he's going to throw an irrational tantrum like Shannon Alvarado did. Or Teresa Orrin did, because they're alcoholics. You cannot reason with an alcoholic. The same as you can't reason with fake Christians, with the believers in the Rambo Jesus, which is nearly everyone today. I don't remember what I called this video when I started it, or why I started it. Same with all my videos. It's more than likely that I was having a panic attack, feeling unsafe. Why do I feel unsafe stuck in parking lots? Why do I feel unsafe alone where I'm forced to record? And I have to record it publicly just in case an officer wants to come arrest me on bogus charges. And if it's only recorded on my audio device, or it's recorded unlisted, people can't see it. They don't have access to it. They don't know what happened or where I went. Here in Tillamook, I looked up the sex offender registry after seeing how many women just in this small town were in jail for having sex with children. One of those women was charged with sodomy. I'm not going to explain that to you. That's what Nicole Gerald did to me. Yes, a woman can sodomize a man. A woman can sodomize a man without his consent and get away with it. But it's not the same against a child or a disabled adult, which is why they pretend that I'm not disabled. They pretend I'm not disabled so they can look away. Because if they admit my disabilities or look at the paperwork that shows my disabilities, then it becomes a felony for them not to do their jobs. Especially in the way that they've done it. Because see, the mandated reporter law is only one of usually about 8 to 10 laws that are pressed on somebody when they don't do their job as a mandated reporter. Because it's not just that they didn't report. Oftentimes they lie to the victim. They lie to the victim to discourage the victim from turning it in. They lie to the victim about what their actual job is as a mandated reporter. And they play on what's called color of law. They lie to the most easy to victimize people. The people who may not have access to look it up, or may not even be able to understand what it is that they're reading. Somebody who is highly intelligent but under a severe amount of stress might be able to read an entire paragraph and not understand any of it. Now, right at the very bottom of the picture on the front of this, what is it? It says there's over 1,000 sex offenders. Those blue dots, every single one of those little blue dots on it is a registered sex offender, a class 3 sex offender. But it also says that there's over 31,000. 31,000. It's like, well, that's about 30 times as many pedophiles that aren't registered. That means for every one of them sick fucks that has to register, there are 30 more who have been tried and fucking convicted that don't have to register. You can't tell them from the average Joe or Jane. You have no way of knowing here in Oregon whether or not your neighbor is one of those other 30. Now, when you consider that there are dots all over here in Tillamook, there's a bunch of sexual predators here in Tillamook. This town breeds sexual predators, it seems to me. And many of those people are allowed to come right back into the community. God, that is a nasty looking pimple. I popped it twice already. Well, look at it, 31,000. 31,000 that are not registered. 31,000, they can walk right next to your school, drive right next to your school, open their door on the way to your kid walking to school or from school. When it's to school, people are less likely to abduct a child. Now, why is this? Why is it more likely that somebody will abduct a child after school? Well, it's not actually true that way. But they try representing that in a story where they talk about how... I'm trying to remember the name of the article. I'm pretty sure it was a lady named Hill, last name Hill, who was a reporter. But it talks about how these children were out in Washington State. They were waiting on the bus. It was snowing. It was really bad snow. And they disappeared before they were able to get on the bus. They also talked about how in that very same state, Washington State, there was a situation that was similar where a lady had seen what was going on and got out of her vehicle and went and stood with the children there before any sort of an incident happened. That's called preemptive. That doesn't mean that somebody committed a crime. That meant that what they were doing was suspicious enough that it warranted the safety of an adult there. Now, a male has to be afraid to be the one that stops in that situation. A male has to be afraid that if he steps in that situation, someone may still mistake him for a male predator because he is a male in the presence of children. Whether he is one of the fathers of the children or not is arbitrary in many cases as well. When it gets called in, it gets called in. And oftentimes, even if the kids are saying that's not him, that still doesn't make a difference. Why is that? Now, Miss Hill made a lot of really good points. Some of them were completely invalidated by some of the other points that she made. She was also intelligent enough to point that out. But she was also talking about how people are, a lot of times, they feel safer when they send their kid to school alone than when their kid comes back. Because when you send your kid to school alone, what you're assuming is that the teachers or the truancy officer or the guidance counselor, if your kid's not there, they're going to call the parents and then they're going to call the police. This child isn't here. We need to know from the parents why the child's not here, checking in for their safety. And after that, if the parents don't answer, it's call the police. If there's a situation where a child is missing for 3 days or more without a doctor's note, then the school is, in some states, mandatorily supposed to call CPS and the police. Because with bruising, a lot of times, if it's a deep bruise, it'll take anywhere between 4 days and a week and a half for that bruise to heal up and go away. And if it's a big one, it could last up to a month. There are people who've gotten really bad infections because the blood that was trapped from a bruise ended up going gangrenous, septic. Well, we won't get into that. Sorry, I got issues with my hand. Some of them because of abuse, and some of them because I was getting into my car and I hyperextended my finger by... It was just dumb. It wasn't intentional. It was just one of them things that happens. Now, this article, one of the important things that it was pointing out is that a lot of parents, they feel less safe with their kids coming home from school because they're more likely to mess around. When they're supposed to be going to school, there's a set time that they have to be there for the bus. So, of course, the bus is going to get there, and then the bus is going to take them safely to the school. But after school, the bus comes and drops them off. It's not that kid getting up, getting dressed, and then going to the bus stop and meeting the kids there. Now, a lot of these kids, they congregate and they travel together home. They travel together in a group or some. And that's the thing, is that people are more likely to abduct your child when your child is alone. There's no guarantee of that, because like that situation in Washington State showed, even if there's multiple children there, those two situations, even if there's multiple children there, there's no guarantee they're not still going to try to grab one. There's also a lot of attempted. There are men who get charged with attempted just for being there. This is something that we need to be deathly afraid of. Right now, there are more women in the jail here in Tillamook for sexual offenses than men. We're not allowed to say that. We're not allowed to admit that, or we're being misogynistic. Is that not correct? Even though it's a true fact. I went through the list today. Also, up until a few days ago, there were more women who committed murder in the jail here than there were men in the jail for committing murder. That's right, murder. So this Miss Hill lady, the lady who wrote I think her name is Hill. Don't quote me on that. It might have been Hall. It might have been somebody else's name that I superimposed just because there's so many names I got to try to remember. It's not the name that's important. It's the information there within. And that's one of the things about doing as much reading as I do. I get to learn a lot of things, but I don't necessarily know the perfect or proper word or terminology. But that doesn't mean that I don't have an understanding of the curriculum, of what it means or entails. All right, I'm going to turn this off. When she was talking about your perception of what situations your children are going to be unsafe in versus the reality of when they're unsafe and why. With a lot of parents, they're afraid that their kids After school, they're just going to mess around for a bit. They're going to spend more time messing around. There's more time that they're out and about and free. You also try to explain, oh well, in the morning, around the time the kids are going to school, that's when everybody's going to work. Not so much. A lot of work schedules kind of work around just before that or just after, unless it's rush hour. You've got the 9 to 5s and you've got the 7 to 3s. Those are pretty common shifts. And one of those is for people primarily that don't have kids or have another parent who is going to take care of the ritual of getting the kids ready for school and off to the bus or off to school. When I was in Washington State going to school, I could ride the bus, but most of the time I walked. The reason that I walked is because it was actually more hazardous for me to get on the bus there as a white kid. It was a lot safer for me personally to walk home. Most of the streets that I walked home on from Lincoln were busy enough and heavy enough with traffic that if somebody tried to assault me, it'd get called in immediately. If I was getting beaten up on the bus driver would probably yell at us and go a couple more blocks before actually stopping the bus and then yelling at us some more. He might come back and pull somebody off of me or pull somebody off with somebody else that's in a fight. Most of the time, it doesn't get to the point where it's a fight. Most of the time, the person who's there knows that he's going to get blamed for the disruption if he speaks up and argues with these bullies at all because he'll get pounced on. We're obviously talking about different scenarios here and different age ranges in that, where the situation up in Washington State, situations in Washington State with those children on snowy days and bus stops versus me getting beaten up because I went to a minority high school. That was in Washington State as well. Yes, there's different motivations. Like a lot of times when a boy is pubescent, like he's hit puberty, then somehow magically he must have wanted it because we have assigned that every boy who hits puberty is willing to have sex with anything with a hole. Even a lot of these men's rights sites still claim that shit. Like, dude, seriously? Some of these guys talk about how it's women's fault for being against traditional marriage. No, it's not. There's women who are for traditional marriage, women who are against. There's men who are for it, men who are against it. When it comes to sexual predators, though, well, we should all be pretty fucking universal about the fact that they fucking suck and they don't belong in society. We want to have a society where we say we need to give everybody a second chance, but then you don't give a homeless man a second chance. He doesn't get the benefit of the doubt. You'll charge him as a sex offender because he has to urinate at 2 o'clock in the morning, but doesn't have the looks or the money to go into the bar and pay for a drink to go to the bathroom. Meanwhile, the bar is more likely to treat him like he's a filthy bum who's a disgusting pervert for going in there than understanding that, yeah, this guy doesn't want to get charged as a pervert for peeing on a wall outside like most of your customers do. The thing is, it could happen at any time. Yes, you may go, all right, well, statistically, what it should mean to me doesn't mean that that's what the statistics are. When you are mixing some little bits and pieces of facts with the bias and wives' tales that you've been bred in your mind to believe, yeah, the more of these wives' tales you hear, the more you want to believe it, the more it is socially acceptable to believe it, whether it's true or not. How many of you have actually seen a homeless person with a sign getting into a convertible sports car and driving to a multi-million-dollar mansion? How many of you have actually seen that? Didn't fucking think so. The screenshot for the front of this is something you can actually see with your own two fucking eyes, and you can look up for yourself. Over 1,000 registered sex offenders. But you know what? There's over 31,000 sexual predators who are not on that list. Imagine 30,000 more of those dots. You wouldn't be able to see the state of Oregon.